change the course of the nation. You know, a lot of times they say, this is the most important race and your vote counts, but really, in this election, our vote absolutely counts. There are multiple polls that have come out since mid-August that show this Senate race is tied 50-50. And a 1% change in Alaska is 2,500 votes. A 0.5% change is 1,200 votes, which means Nenana can determine the outcome of this race. Every community I go to, every neighborhood I go to has the potential to determine who wins this election. Whether you don't vote, the election goes one way. When you do vote, the election can go another way. And I think, you know, a lot of times these communities, Nenana specifically, I mean, Josh and I have been working on Nenana since 2020 together. We've been working on different issues 3 years. Your community is often forgotten and overlooked in the larger political game that is Juneau, definitely the political calculation of Washington, D.C. And talked to a lot of people. Nikki and I, this is my husband over here wearing the Kelly hat. Nikki and I have knocked on several thousand doors across the state. Bethel, Yavik, down in the Aleutians, down through Southeast, of course through the rail belt, up in Fairbanks. But a lot of times what I hear is Alaskans saying we feel forgotten, we feel ignored, we feel our voices aren't heard. When we contact the senator, we don't get a response. If you call today, the phone just goes straight to voicemail. And that's what we need to change. We need to make sure that your community is represented. I mean, Nenana, I believe, is on the gateway to development for the future of Alaska. You guys know that. You know the potential of this community. I think I'd like to move us past potential into reality and what we could do. But to do that, you need to understand the stories, the voices, what's actually happening here, what could happen to carry those stories in our hearts personally rather than just read the policy of it. This is one of the reasons I've been out here a couple times. This is one of the reasons why Mayor Josh and I talk on the phone regularly, and he's got my personal number. So Nenana can determine the outcome of this election by deciding to mobilize the vote, bundle votes, and get out to vote. All of these votes matter. And this is the election where Washington, D.C. establishment is, I'm going to stumble on my words here, might need some more caffeine. They're going to hear our voice because they think that this election is going to go one way. They've been flooding the state with tens of millions of dollars in dark money, trying to tell us lies and persuade us to vote certain ways. But Alaskans aren't falling for it. And this is the Senate seat that often is the tie-breaking vote, the decision-making vote, the one that the nation wakes up and goes, well, how is she going to vote today? This is the Senate seat that determines the outcome of the nation. So it isn't just the outcome of the future of our state, which is immediately pressing for us when we used to choose to eat the food that we canned, caught, and killed. Now we're forced to eat the food we canned, caught, and killed because of where our economy is. No other state in the nation is having to live this way. We get to decide the outcome of the future of Alaska, but in making this decision, we're determining the outcome of the future of the nation with the vote of this Senate seat. And that is a lot of power that us invisible, forgotten, overlooked Alaskans get to have this year. And Nenana gets to determine and have a voice in the outcome of this race. And that's one of the reasons why Nikki and I are doing this 2-week road trip tour where we're hitting 3 or 4 communities every day, and we're door knocking in between. So if we have time today in Nenana, we'll go door to door. Josh and I have decided we're going to go see the biomass project that you guys are starting because that's huge, huge for what we could do in the future of Alaska. And that'll be a really great way to spend some time today. So I don't know if we'll be able to fit in the entire agenda that we wanted to do in Nenana, but we're knocking on doors every place we go. We were out till 9 o'clock last night knocking over in Healy, talking to people door to door. That's the best way I know to keep the finger on the pulse of what Alaskans think. We believe in public servants, not politicians. We believe that it's supposed to be of the people, by the people, for the people, not about me, myself, and I. We don't understand why our cost of living goes up while their quality of living goes up, right? And these are some of the things that we are committed to changing around, which is why I come to you rather than expecting you to come to me. And that's what we're trying to do with everything we've been doing in the campaign, but especially with this Get Out the Vote road trip tour to come and answer questions and see what's happening. I'll tell you the story real quick, and then I want to hear from you. So people will often ask, why are you doing this? Never thought I would grow up and run for Senate. That story started when my parents moved up here back in the 70s. I'll knock on a lot of doors and people will say, I don't want to talk politics. And I'll say, thank God, me either. I mean, does anybody relate? But this year, it's not about politics, it's personal for us. And my family, my parents came looking for more opportunity, and life ended up going upside down on them. They ended up being homeless. And they picked up odds and ends jobs but couldn't get enough to get into a house until mom got a job at the Slope. And resource jobs will change everything. They got into a mobile home, they got a starter home in Wasilla, they had me. I had a great childhood. I was the first in our immediate family to get to pursue a college degree. I started at UAA, I worked for Senator Stevens. He encouraged me to go to law school. That's where Nikki and I met. That's where I get my last name, Tshibaka. Nikki's the son of an African immigrant, and yes, the force is with us. It does sound like the Star Wars here. We have 5 kids, ages 8 to 18, and one of our little ones has his birthday today, so we're calling and getting to celebrate long distance today. When we saw last year that they started to shut down all of those industry jobs for us, I took it personally because that's my mom's job. And that's all of our jobs, our ability to pay rent and put food on the table and create a different outcome for our families, right? Take a family from poverty to the working class if they want. And I want to fight for the Alaskans who fought for me. I think government's supposed to be for us, not against us. And I've actually committed my career to this. So I stumbled into a career line working in anti-swamp offices in DC. Nikki got a great job after law school. I didn't. I had to find a job. It turns out there's anti-swamp offices in DC. That sounded awesome. But I broke some cases. One of my first cases that went to the U.S. Supreme Court was about FBI officials violating their trust of authority and abusing Americans. And I got absolutely hooked. I never thought I'd see that. Who'd have thunk? But I realized if you don't have people in there working for us, then government's a little bit designed to be against us. So for 20 years now, I've been working to improve government, make it more efficient, return billions of dollars to us taxpayers, hold insiders accountable. And that's what we're just continuing now with this campaign. How do we get government to be best for us here in Alaska? What can we do to make sure these radical environmentalists who've been confirmed in the Biden administration that has now launched its attacks against us, how can we turn that narrative around? And one example is all these inspector general offices I've worked in that are embedded in Biden's bureaucracy, they work for the US Congress as well as for Biden's bureaucrats. So when we walk in on day one, I will be the only senator in the US Senate of 100 senators who understands the bureaucracy from the ground up, having worked as an entry-level employee to senior management, always as a watchdog, making them work for us. I will understand how to get the bureaucracy to work, and we don't have to move through Congress to do it. We can actually move immediately through the Biden administration to do it. We will have thousands of federal law enforcement agents and lawyers and auditors and inspectors who can help us as Alaskans push back on federal overreach, which will be a huge skill set. None of the other senators knows how to leverage like we will know. That's one thing that we'll be able to do. I don't believe in saying one thing to Alaskans and doing the opposite in DC. Like when my opponent was running ads up here saying Biden's coming to grab our guns while she was voting with Biden and McConnell on red flag laws and gun control. We need to talk straight. I might not always be popular with you for what we're doing, but you'll always know that I'm going to shoot straight and say it like it is. So my dad always said, kid, talk straight. They might not like what you say, but they'll know where you stand. And in Alaska, we call that respect. And I thank you all that you've always talked straight with me. So there have been some tough questions and some straight talk, but at least we know where we stand. And you'll never have to wake up going, I wonder how Tshibaka's going to vote today. You'll never have to wonder, because we'll just always shoot straight. We're not funding our campaign with tens of millions of dark money from outside in the lower 48. The last reporting period, National News was reporting that we're still largely funded by Alaskans. And last week, my team said our average donation is $76. Think of that, if that's average, how many people are still giving less than that? So go, 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 little engine that could. And what that means for me, having been in DC doing investigations of government officials, you owe people who have paid for you to get there. Think of it that way. Our voice needs to be an Alaskan voice. I won't be bought and bullied by DC insiders. I have our team scrub the donation list every day. Anyone who gets in there, we don't want to have to owe a vote to someone whose interests are contrary to the interests of Alaskans. We want an Alaskan voice and an Alaskan vote. So the people of Alaska, God is there, is the people of Alaska will represent. And another issue Alaskans talk to me about is seniority. We lost the chairmanship of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee 2 years ago. We can't get it again until we start our seniority clock over. And it's really important to us that we have seniority on these committees. If my opponent's reelected, she is not in line for the chairmanship of any of the major committees again. And so the maximum value we have in that seniority is expired. And we need to absolutely make sure that we have the value there in order to have the influence we need for Alaska. We have to ask ourselves questions that pertain to you. If we had the chairmanship of that energy committee for 6 years, why are we still paying the highest prices in the nation for energy? Why don't we have better energy solutions up here? And so these are some of the things I think we need to deliver results for. I don't think government is easy, but I do think it's simple. So for example, with working with Mayor Josh, we were able to deliver a simple solution here in Nenana to get you guys a return on several $100,000 the state gave you. It was going to pull from you. It wasn't easy, but it was simple. It just took some elbow grease from me working with Josh to get you guys the money by getting government to do what it needed to do at the state of Alaska level. Another one that I ran into, and this affects you all as well, when I came into the state of Alaska government, we only hired people in Anchorage and in Fairbanks and Juneau. And the rule was if somebody leaves a position in Anchorage, we can only hire somebody in Anchorage to fill that position. That didn't make a lot of sense to me because I'm used to running personnel organizations, and the answer is you hire best talent. And I don't think best talent in Alaska only lives in Anchorage and Fairbanks and Juneau.
Hear, hear.
I think best talent is all through the state. It required changing policies, it required changing technology, it required letting us do telework, which we'd never done before. I got a lot of resistance for all of this, but we made it happen. Again, it's not easy, but it was simple. And we made thousands and thousands of jobs available for telework throughout the state. Anywhere that we had reasonable internet connection, people can work remotely. I hired a director in my agency to work full-time from a rural village where he still works from this day. A 6-figure job in a village will change everything. But that opens up jobs across the state where people can work with, they can live where they love and work for the state that they love. It's not easy, but it's simple. My opponent has had 21 years and has never put thousands and thousands of jobs in remote and rural Alaska. So these are the kind of solutions that I think we need to move into, moving past rhetoric to delivering results. So I'll pause because I've got other things to say, but I don't want to do all the talking. I want to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts, your comments, your questions? Yes, sir.
When you mentioned about gas and petroleum,
Yes.
2 minutes ago, gas here is like 75 cents to $1 more than Fairbanks. Here in Nenana.
Do you know why that is?
Yeah.
Why is it?
I just wanted to let you know that for now. I don't have a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
But it's been that way.
If anybody's hungry, we do have lots of.
Pardon?
She was saying you can help yourself with food. Yeah, so I heard this recently from someone who lived in a village where they were getting charged $2 or $3 more a gallon.
Yeah, I lived in villages, many different villages for
Yeah.
many years, all over western, northwestern, and interior Alaska since 1977.
And it's the same out there, right? The villages have to pay a lot more.
It is the same, and it isn't in some ways, lotteries.
Okay. Yeah, getting, I think, equitable energy pricing throughout Alaska has got to be a top priority for us. And I think that there are some solutions we can pursue that would help bring energy costs down across the state. Again, they're not easy, but they are simple. Other questions and feedback? Yeah.
I'm interested in what some of your solutions would be, because one reason Nenana has higher fuel rates is because we are a small community.
Yeah.
One reason villages have higher fuel rates is because they are small communities. They're dealing with a very small amount of petroleum products coming out. So what means that there's solutions? What are those solutions?
Yeah. So some of these are innovative technologies brought in by the private sector that we have not yet pioneered here, and creating favorable business environments where we can do that. So sometimes we say we're open to business, but when I saw inside working for the Department of Administration, we don't actually have some of those policies that really help business in Alaska. So working with the governor's administration to create some of those policy changes that we can do just inside the executive branch to be open to business so these innovators would come in. Like, we have the renewable energy technologies that can develop and power energy just like solely at your home. They pioneered these across third world countries, clean energy that distributes power to your home, that could heat your home and power your home for low cost. We could bring those into Alaska. They would work in remote and rural communities really easily. We just need the favorable business environment to do it and to pioneer it. So working with commerce here in Alaska, working with these private industries that want to try and pioneer out here would be an easy solution. We need to develop refineries in Alaska again. We've shut down a lot of our refineries. That's one of the reasons why our costs are so high. Developing a refinery in Fairbanks or North Pole region would really help us. Another idea that people have started exploring, and I think that this is creative, is turning some of our natural gas that we are stockpiling, that we inject back into the ground up at the North Slope, turning that into DC power current that we run down the pipeline and then branch off into interior communities as a source of power supply for people. There are companies that are interested in doing this. We just need to get them the permits to do so, and that goes back to the permitting reform that we're trying to push through Congress. Dan Sullivan's championing that now. I'm not sure we're going to get a lot of headway in the next 2 years, but I think after 2024 we will. And then we'll be able to deliver some affordable solutions with those kind of things, whether it's LNG, refineries, or the DC power current. There's all kinds of ways that we can look into how we reform energy solutions throughout interior and Western Alaska. Yeah, I appreciate the follow-up. Most people don't want to get into the details. That's why I kind of pause and wait to see what the appetite is.
Well, just on that, like, it's difficult for communities to have goods and other things affordable when there's no industry, which is one of the biggest problems, I think, in Alaska, is that how difficult it is to develop industry because of a lot of the red tape and a lot of the bureaucracy and the permitting process that is just, a lot of it is almost designed to just kill growth, industry, development, etc. So what kind of things could you do in your position to try and help industry to flourish in rural communities to help bring those the cost of living down?
So you're absolutely right. What we have on the law in the books is that a permitting situation needs to take about 2 years to come through. And if you're going to go past the 2 years, that's a big exception that they have to write a justification for. That exception is now the rule. The permitting process now takes 4.5 to 5 years, and then they go through that process 2 or 3 times. So our permitting process takes as long as our process from exploration to the development of the project. So what I just told you is a resource project takes 30 years, like somebody's entire career. That's not okay. That means that government is injecting as much risk into the cost of our project as it is in, say, Venezuela. And we should not have the same kind of cost of business and risk of investment as a country like Venezuela. So it's easier for our investors to go over to places like the Middle East or Africa to start doing business than it is to do business in Alaska. And we need to turn that narrative around. If the law is that the bureaucracy has to permit in 2 years, then we need to really enforce those scope and those timelines in order to make sure that our companies, when they get a final record of decision, that is actually final and that they can count on that. And so we need to go back and I think look at why are all these exceptions being granted. We need to hold the bureaucracy accountable. Having done this for a long time, Project Matrix essentially is built on money and then scope and then time. It's just a triangle. So as long as you keep giving them more and more money, they'll expand their scope and they'll expand their time. But if you start to threaten budget cuts, they'll keep within their scope, they'll keep within their time. You can just put more people on a project and get a project done in 2 years. You really can. 2,040 hours times 1 employee times however many employees is enough to get an Alaskan project scoped out. So I think those are the kind of things we can look at, but we don't need to just do it through Congress and congressional hearings. When we have a senior person on appropriations and a senior person who's on energy, we need to ask why these things haven't happened yet. And we can use that method, or we can go back to those inspector general offices that I told you about. These inspectors general are in every one of these agencies that's doing permitting. And we can go back to them and say, could you please look at this project? And it wasn't done according to the guidelines and the rules. The Supreme Court just came out and said EPA, do you want me to help you? Yeah. EPA just blew through its authority and what it's doing with its regulations, and it's acting more like Congress than it is like an executive branch office. Using that EPA Supreme Court case, I think we have a really good basis to go to these inspector general offices and say, could you please look at the abuse of authority in these permitting reviews? We need healthy permitting. We just need it to be within bounds that our companies also can depend on it, our states can depend on it, and our people can depend on it. Otherwise, we're getting into a 10th Amendment violation. If it's not in the Constitution, it belongs to the states and the people. And we should be able to get a project done in less than 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I get,
On the fuel point, you said that, basically that, how to say it, with us being in the middle of Anchorage and Fairbanks,
That's right.
and the fuel prices here being so much more than both, is there some kind of regulatory committee or something that can investigate price gouging and all that goes along with it? And why is it we're paying $6-something here and you can get it for $3.98 in Fairbanks, and every truck that delivers fuel has to come through Indiana?
Yes, there absolutely is. So that's more a state local jurisdiction, but there absolutely is. And that example that I gave you that I heard at AFN this week, this woman called and said, hey, this is what's happening, and they got called on it, and they had to drop their price in the rural village to match their hub community.
Right, because
Something's happening.
all of Fort Wainwright, all of their training, every one of them, they stop here for fuel or whatever. So it's not like the demand's not there, but there's no overwatch or anything on. I mean, I understand if you have to, like the store, you know, you gotta drive to town, they have to drive to go get their stuff, and then they have to mark it up to make money, obviously. Only makes sense. But with the fuel trucks coming through there 24/7.
Right. Making a stop doesn't seem like it would add that much to the
Yeah.
cost, correct? And there was a subtle question that wasn't asked, but I'll answer it. What are the future industrial ideas for growing Nenana, right? You guys are sitting on a huge block of potential, but what do we do? So you've got your biomass project, which is a great idea. I know we're getting federal funds for it, but here's the real potential you have. You are in the geopolitical strategic diamond of the world. Where you sit geographically is the hot spot for national security protection for America. So I worked in the national security community for over a decade. The world can see right now that we have tensions with Russia and China, but we always have. And where you sit is where we are closest to Russia, China, North Korea, and Indonesia. And tensions are really building, and the Arctic is opening up, and we can see that the Arctic strategies that China and Russia have are absolutely polar opposite of the Arctic strategies of the United States. And we are about 20 years behind in building our defense and readiness capacity in the Arctic as the United States. There's only one state that's in the Arctic, and it's ours. So what I would like to do is really advocate and build on those relationships. So much in DC is done on relationships. When I was in the IC, I was a senior leader in Obama's administration. So a lot of those people who are in leadership now were in leadership then. Build on those relationships to really advocate for the funding and the infrastructure that we need to build out capacity for readiness and preparedness so that we can be on the front lines of protecting the nation. And that means not just defense, it means national security, which means space and satellites. Space and satellites are really the future for protecting America, and the best place to put that is in interior and western Alaska. We have the geography for it, the space. It also means that we then need to build the neighborhood capacity to house all of those people. The similar thing we need to do is Coast Guard. We need to protect the EEZ. We continue to say we need to protect it, but then we've actually got to divert the resources to doing it. And it doesn't mean just ships and aircraft, and I think we need to put more money into drones. It means we need to actually build the human resource capacity, and we need to build out the neighborhoods for that to be able to fly those planes and be able to man those ships. And we've talked before about the need for neighborhood infrastructure here in Nenana to build out more military capacity for what we can do to build up our defense and readiness capacity. All of that to say, this is a large part of how we laid the foundation for Alaska originally, was through the infrastructure that our defense community created, where we partner defense and national security together. The best way to develop their resources in Alaska is roads and railroads to resources. And as they build out the national security parameters, think about the gateway that we need to build from Fairbanks out to Nome, right? And it would go straight through Nenana. And if they build that out for us, we don't need to go through the lengthy permitting process. It's a national security emergency and priority. And now we have all the infrastructure we need for you guys to move goods and services quickly between these places, to develop roads and resources to, roads and railroads to resources between here and there that we can start to access and develop responsibly. This is a kind of a long-term plan for the future. Side note, I run IT and IT audits in many organizations. How exciting is it that our cloud service providers around the nation have run out of space? Which means we need new space for the cloud. And the cloud is not in the sky. The cloud is essentially hotels of servers located around the United States. Silicon Valley's tapped out. It's kind of shaped like Anchorage, and they butt up against the mountains. The cloud is also located in Oregon. There's a cloud location right outside the Washington, D.C. area, but they're out of space. So our cloud service providers are people like Amazon and Google and Microsoft, and they are looking for more space. The biggest expenses in running the cloud are air conditioning and physical security. You need to be able to protect your hotel, and you need to be able to get the heat out from all the servers. When I was commissioner and I ran IT for the state, I started talking to our cloud service providers to say, why don't we start thinking about Alaska as a cloud service provider location, especially in the interior and in Western Alaska. You can see people coming for thousands of miles, and you don't need to worry about air conditioning. Right? And if you couple this concept with where we're going with space and satellites and defense, because these two things really blend well together, think about the NSA, the CIA, the NGA, then these things really blend well together, and UAF is your training ground. You see, because you got to have the pipeline to feed into this. And then they start popping up cloud server farms, like between here and Fairbanks, for example, or just north of Fairbanks. And again, you need to house all these people and grow your community. You could even put your cloud service farms underground, where you have a constant sort of temperature, and your perimeters and what you have to do for security is a lot safer. Now all of a sudden your cloud costs drop and you become immediately competitive against all of your other cloud service providers. They said, that's a genius idea, why didn't we think of it? Maybe because you're not Alaskan. You never scoped it out. But imagine the corridor that we could build between here and just north of Fairbanks of becoming like the new IT central hub for America.
Wow.
Right? And so I went in and talked to the ASRC about this when I was commissioner, and they said, funny that you would say that. We've been thinking about ways to diversify the North Slope if we're not going to be able to open oil, and we've thought about becoming a cloud service provider as well.
Wow.
So this idea, what we can do here is huge. I think Nenana, this dot on the map, honestly will become like Anchorage just used to be a dot on the map. We actually used to be very Wasilla-centric, Wasilla and Palmer-centric, and Anchorage used to just be the pass-through town, right? Kind of like Nenana is. Well, I really see that changing. When you look at the map and what you guys are and what this whole region can become, the vision that we have for this, Nenana is going to become a huge portal, just like Anchorage has become. That's what I imagine.
Yeah, it kind of shows,
Exactly.
the bridge there, and they already got plans for 180,000 acres of agriculture.
Exactly. In our agriculture, like we have a food security challenge in Alaska that we need to solve. And once we solve that, I think we're going to become an export hub. There's so much demand for our quality of produce across not only our country, but in other countries.
Around Nenana got one of the richest soils in the world.
Exactly. And if we can develop that corridor and start exporting out of Nome, it becomes huge. Yeah.
I know.
Her son-in-law just got 180 acres for growing
Oh,
yet.
congratulations.
What will you be growing?
He wants to grow wheat.
Oh, good.
Awesome.
My dad is texting me because I'm telling everybody, Kelly's here, Kelly's here, Kelly's here. And
Sure.
He's asking me if, he's worried about election integrity and how he really thinks he'll get elected if the election is honest. So do you have any idea about, and that's his question, and then I have my own question. But his question is, any idea about election integrity? Because we all know that you're going to win. The only thing that's going to stop it is election issues, and that's what we're worried about. So any ideas about that? I know that kind of lays on us because we need to be responsible to be our own poll watchers too, so we need to take responsibility for ourselves
Sure.
as well.
Pam, do you mind if I tag on to that?
Yeah,
When
go
you're something-
ahead.
I was gonna mention too, it's not telling people how to vote or who to vote for or anything, but with the way they got this system now in the state,
Yeah.
people can get confused with first choice, second choice, and go through that.
Absolutely. Hey,
Because you could vote
Victoria,
for the wrong person.
I don't see Nikki, but can you go get the
Right.
scroll roll up in the car for me?
Yes.
I forgot to bring it in. Yes, and I have a visual for that, because I get asked this question every time. I should have brought it in. I just jumped out so quickly.
Hang on, let me get my dad on the phone so he can hear you.
Yeah, you're totally fine, Pam.
I think a lot of people don't even understand the ranked choice voting and how it works and how can we get our person elected using ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
And I don't even quite understand it.
I'm gonna put you right next to Kelly. So
I I'm happy to explain it. I explained on the radio. Hi, Dad. Sorry, Dad. I got recently. Oh, you're totally fine. And I'm happy to answer any question, even if you're not voting for me first. I'm happy to answer this because I don't like the collateral voter suppression that comes when people don't understand. I would rather everybody vote, even if it's not me you're voting for, just because you understand. So, and I got on Dan Fagan this morning, and apparently they didn't understand, like, for a year now. I was like, no, actually, that's not true. This is what's happening, and it led to this, like, what? Yeah, there's a lot of confusion out there. So, voting integrity first. Pam and Dad, I am not concerned about us losing the election because of voting integrity. And that sounds surprising, but this is where I'm confident. I did an audit of the Division of Elections in 2019. The way you do an audit is you look at best practices, and there's about 26 identified best practices for systems across the country. They mostly all agree. So whether you lean right or whether you lean left, these are just best practices for systems. And then there are vulnerabilities that lead to fraud. And again, everybody mostly agrees. These are the vulnerabilities. And then what you do is you evaluate your system against best practices and vulnerabilities. And then the audit shows this is where our system's good and this is where our system is vulnerable. I'm not allowed to share what's in the audit because they marked it deliberative process and they haven't released it. But I know where our system is vulnerable. And so what we have done is we've said we need people to help us at the precincts on election day, and we need people to help us with ballot counting afterwards. And the Division of Elections just always needs help. What we're doing with our team is we're training them what to look for. And the what to look for are our top vulnerabilities, okay? I don't believe in clean elections. I don't think we've ever had a clean election. And I'm okay with that because we're human, right? So even before we use machines, there's not clean elections. What we want is an election that reflects the will of the voters, even though elections are fallible, okay? We just accept that, all right? Having read the Arizona audit, having watched, Philadelphia or Pennsylvania struck down its absentee ballots as unconstitutional, Wisconsin said its drop boxes are illegal. This isn't the first election where things were like, we have some questions. Okay. So with that, our job is to go in and do the best we can at making sure that the will of the voters is reflected. And we know the top things to look for and to train our people to look for those vulnerabilities. We're essentially going to send in miniature auditors. And it's not that Kelly wins, it's that the will of the voters is reflected. Okay, that's all it is. That's all it is. And we would welcome that from the other side as well, right? Right. Okay. So with that, people will say, well, are you going to do this or going to do that? It's like, I'm not, like, what if they bubble in other bubbles on your sheet? It doesn't affect the election. It really doesn't. So, and I don't, having been there and watched it, there's not a whole bunch of Division of Elections people there who have time to sit there and bubble in sheets. That's not the vulnerability. So I'm not particularly concerned about this. This is a huge risk, I understand, but with the plan that we have, I feel like we've mitigated the risk. So that's my comfort. Did you have the paper? Where's Nikki? That's awkward.
What about the Dominion voting machines that have been talked about so much?
Yeah.
There's been hacking and all kinds of things like that. How are you going to protect against that? Would that be part of the audit, that they'd be watching to see if there's anybody hacking?
Yeah. So the Dominion voting machines were part of our audit, and I can't tell you what I said about the Dominion voting machines and whether I told them not to get the Dominion voting machines. I'm not allowed to tell you what I said. But I can tell you that every single electronic tabulation machine has the exact same problem. There's only 3 in the nation we use. It's not like we could switch to another one and it's more secure. As long as you use an electronic tabulation machine, it can be compromised because a tabulation machine is just like a laptop. Laptops can be compromised. But this is the issue. A tabulation machine, you can put security procedures around. Thanks, I will.
You just do a little drawing, I guess.
Thank you for helping. I can draw quickly. A tabulation machine is just like a computer. So the security protocols I put around my 8-year-old's Chromebook are completely different than the security protocols I have on my laptop. And there are security protocols you can put around a Dominion machine to keep it safe. And so then the question is, did the Division of Elections put the security protocols around all of our tabulation machines to protect them? And I cannot answer that question for you. So that's the only question that really matters is, are our machines being used, can they be penetrated or can they not be penetrated, right? The security that we put around the governor's computer is different than the security you put around your kid's computer, right? It's just a computer. And you're right that these machines are very hackable when you don't have the right security protocols around them. And we cannot go in and see and change, like the way that these machines can be hacked and manipulated are not something that somebody observing can change. One of the good news is, for us in Alaska, you put your thing in the electronic machine, then they keep the hard copy ballots. So you can validate that this machine's, you could pull the stack of ballots out and say, did this machine's electronic tabulation records match what the hard copy ballots say? The hard copy ballots cannot be changed by the machine. It's not like they can undo, you go in and you do your marker. It's not like they erase your marker and then they mark somebody else. That's not what the machines do. The machines can be remotely accessed to change a code, but it's not going to change that stack of hard copy ballots at the end. And our division keeps those hard copy ballots so that they could validate, did this machine produce the right record?
That's good to know. That's good to know.
Right, algorithms can be modified remotely, but hard copy ballots cannot. So that's one of our good news is that was one of the security checks and balances that's in our system. Okay, so, Nikki, could you go grab the scroll for me? Thanks, that'll save us some time. So I will, I'll show you the thing that we have, a kind of a big demo we have, but for our answer, and I'll explain ranked choice too. If you want Kelly Tshibaka to win, then on our ballot, wherever I am on the list, there will be the bullets 1, 2, 3, 4, like a multiple choice test. You can ace your test by just bubbling in Kelly Tshibaka 1. Okay? The only time it matters what your second or third place vote is if you are going to mark Buzz Kelly or Pat Chesbrough 1. They're never going to get to Murkowski's second place votes, and they're never going to get to my second place votes. So it does not matter if you rank or don't rank after us. And I'll explain why. Because I often get these looks like, huh? You've never heard this before. Yeah. So what's going to happen on election day, if we don't cross 50% on round 1, we're hovering right there. We're very close. What'll happen is I will come in first with a pretty far lead over Murkowski. Murkowski will come in second. Pat Chesbrough will come in third, and Buzz Kelly suspended his campaign and he's helping me. So he'll pick up a few votes. Buzz Kelly drops off first. His second place votes, which ones he has, will most likely come to me. His other votes will drop off. Pat Chesbrough will then drop off, regardless of where the race stands. Most of her second place votes are going to go to Murkowski. Some of her second place votes are going to drop off. They will then flip and they'll say who has more votes, Tshibaka or Murkowski. Okay? That's all they're going to look at. You'll notice I never said, then they'll look at Murkowski as second place, then they'll look at Tshibaka as second place. Which means it does not matter if you rank anybody second or third or fourth on my ballot. You're just spending more time in the ballot box. You can if you want to, but it doesn't matter. You see? So I say, let's keep ranked choice simple. Just mark Kelly Tshibaka 1 and move on. You cannot use this same strategy in the congressional race if you want a Republican to take Don Young's seat back. Don Young would want a Republican. You have to mark both Sarah and Nick, or Nick and Sarah, whichever order you prefer, 1 and 2. We learned our lesson back in August. That's how ranked choice works. You can't split that vote. One of them is going to fall off. So it's going to go Mary, and then Nick and Sarah, or Sarah and Nick, I don't know. One of them is going to fall off. And when they do, their second place votes are going to roll up to the other person. But if you didn't vote for someone second, then those votes drop, you see what I'm saying? Those votes drop off. And that's what happened in August, is 25% of Nick's people didn't rank anyone, those votes dropped off, and that's why Sarah didn't win. So if you want a Republican to win that seat, you have to back up your vote with a second place vote. But they're going to get to a second place on that one. Okay, any questions on that? And we'll bring in a visual aid to show you.
How do they decide where the funds are gonna go, the votes are gonna go for, as they move on?
Yeah, so, you're welcome. Let me do the congressional ballot. Go for you real quick.
So just to clarify, your second place vote will only be counted if your first choice is
eliminated.
Okay, yep.
Yep, that's right. So I'm putting this in the order that in the congressional ballot, the order that they were for the primary, for the August race. Okay. Can you see this? Mary, Sarah won second place, and then Nick, and then Chris Spy will come in fourth place probably. So who do you want to rank number one for Congress, Sarah or Nick?
Nick.
I heard more Nicks. Okay, so Nenana's for Nick. So we're ranking Nick number one. So we're gonna fill in this here, and then we're gonna be smart, and we're gonna rank Sarah number two. Right? That's what your ballot will look like. If you're for Nick first and Sarah two. Okay, Nick is first and Sarah's number two. Okay? So if that's the case, then what happens is, let's say Nick drops off, just like in the last one. So then Nick's ballots disappear. And so then this line is crossed out, and they say, okay, who did you vote for next? And they go, oh, you voted for Sarah. And now all of your votes will then go over to Sarah's column. So Chris is gone, Nick is gone, and they put all your votes as if you voted first place for Sarah. And then they say, who has more votes, Mary or Sarah? That's what they're gonna look at. So they'll look at Chris's votes, and people who voted Chris number one, they'll say, who did they vote for number two? They'll put the number two votes in the number one column. Who did they vote number three? They'll put the number three votes in the number two column. So let's say those go to Nick. Then Nick is eliminated, and they'll say, okay, let's say some people voted for Sarah as number three. Now those number three votes get put into Sarah's number one column as we trickle up. It's like a cascade up, is how this works.
Kelly, what's your opinion of this? Do you like this system or not?
Alaskans voted for it, and my main concern is that it disenfranchises voters. So we're hearing Nenana talking about Nenana issues and Nenana concerns, and percentage-wise, how much have we spent talking about ranked choice? We've spent most of our time so far talking about this system.
Yeah.
This is true in every place I go. We're not talking about what I stand for, what I'm gonna do for you as senator, what you need. We're talking about how do we eliminate confusion so you'll vote.
Yeah.
And what I run into when I knock at doors, when I'm talking to people, is a lot of, I don't trust this system. Do you see what happened in 2020? I'm not gonna vote, and I spend a lot of my time just persuading people, however you vote, vote. And one of the biggest challenges we have in America is making sure that we don't have voter suppression. I just call that voting rights. That's not election integrity, that's voting rights. And I'm concerned that ranked choice is a voting rights issue. When it is so confusing, you need a handbook to explain it. Yes. We have a problem.
I got one question about what you
Yeah.
said voting. You know,
Yeah.
what's the percentage of the USA, total USA population, percentage of people that voted? Do you know that? Or just
I do.
People here, somebody didn't know that?
In the US, it hovers around 25% is your average. I think we had 23% that voted in August. On a high election, you'll have 30%.
Okay. I mean, okay, for like president.
30% is your normal.
Of the entire adult voting age population. Wow.
That is so little.
Yeah.
Very, very low.
Yeah, so, hey Pam, can you take me another piece of paper? I think we packed quickly and I buried the big scroll thing. I'll have to go find it in the car. Probably dumped under a bunch of stuff. I'll show you what to do for the Senate ballot, yeah.
So back to Nenana and the issues that we were talking about that he brought up of the price of gas being higher here. Obviously, that's an issue that affects us and it matters to us. One of the reasons that I've seen for that is no competition.
That's right.
Teddy Roosevelt was known as the monopoly buster because at the time there was like one family owning all the steel and one family owning all the railroad, and there was not fair competition.
Correct.
What do you see can be done to be a monopoly buster, so to speak, to make a more fair market in Alaska and incentivize competition?
Well, we have a couple policies in Alaska at the statewide level that sort of reduce competition in different sectors, and I think we need to get rid of those policies. That'll really help, like certificate of need in our medical community, that really limits competition. We have people who come in and build mental health facilities right away, but they're not allowed to. And so I would like to really address some of those. I worked as the Federal Trade Commission Acting Inspector General. So speaking of the agency that looks at monopolies and does things about it. Again, a lot of this is built on relationship and how you get people to pay attention to things. So getting some of those people, the Bureau of Competition, to come up here and look at things like the issues where we need the most help, getting them to come in with their rulemaking power or take some of these things before their adjudication board. Once you get a decision in your favor, it then becomes precedent in the state and everybody else has to follow. It would really just be kind of, again, it's not easy, but it's simple. Just knowing where to go and what to do and how to get consumer protection cases and competition cases in order to protect Alaskans. A lot of times we're just off the radar. We're 4,000 miles away and nobody knows what's happening.
Yeah.
But if we know what's happening and we can get a small case before a big group to protect us, it can have a big difference. And that's what I would do is, bring FTC attention to an issue like this.
And on a national level, what do you see can be done about some of the big tech monopolies that are creating an unfair market for small business?
Mm-hmm. The same thing, but it's a lot harder, Mayor Josh. So we get questions about the big tech challenge all the time, meaning in between law to govern social media space so that there's not over censorship. What I call in between law is big tech isn't complete free speech. We don't want people inciting terrorist acts on social media. It's also not censorship space because they don't operate like the Washington Post. We don't want them filtering every single comment all the time. But it's obviously in between. There's some element of an expectation of free speech of some level, but it's not complete free speech. So we have to write the in-between law, and we have to allow some competition of there being able to be other free speech social media spaces where it's not just this there's the large giants in the room, and the way that they run social media spaces means that they absolutely dominate and capitalize on it. The challenge that I found, having written in-between space in the national security, in-between law in the national security community, we had, in the beginning of the war on terror, remember the NSA was spying on our phone conversations? And my office found out about it, and we said, you can't do that. They said, yes, we can. All the law applies to phones plugged into the wall because the law is really old. There's no law that applies to cell phones, so we can spy on cell phones. And we said, no. We wrote the in-between law. The in-between law was privacy law that respects to eavesdropping on homes, and the law that applies to phones that plug in the wall. So we took both those things and we blended them together to create the rule for the executive branch until Congress caught up to where we were as a society. Congress is a little bit slow on things like, how long has the internet been here? It's been here a while. We haven't written the in-between law yet. Part of the reason Congress is slow is because they take a lot of donations from big tech. And they have a financial incentive to not regulate big tech. And so it leaves big tech to be regulated by the executive branch where bureaucrats aren't taking money from big tech. But right now we see all these stories where big tech is actually partnering with the bureaucracy to do the agenda of the bureaucracy. So then who's going to step in and protect us? Who's gonna protect the monopoly? Who's gonna protect the speech? Who's gonna protect us from being spied on by big tech? And right now, I'm concerned about the stories where big tech's actually a branch of the federal government. And we don't have any check or balance on this. So when we were talking earlier about the donations, one of the things that we've been watching for is making sure no several $1,000s donation comes in from any of the big tech companies. I don't ever want to have that conversation afterwards, because we need to be a free agent to be able to come in there and start proposing laws that regulate big tech. Because I've done IT, and I've done the FTC, and I've done the national security community, and we might be the lone wolf out there, but someone's got to stand up for us.
Awesome.
Yeah. And let me draw this for you guys real quick. So this is your sample ballot for Senate. Hopefully we'll find the other one in the car, because it was much prettier. So quiet.
I have
Really
another
like
question. I
watching
was just
Kelly
going to let you
No, I
follow up
can
on that.
think and draw at the same time. I'm a mom.
Yeah, know
Well,
how that goes.
maybe I'll tell real quick those who hear what Kelly has done for Nenana, because she alluded to it a little bit. But it was very impressive to me, and I had no idea at one point she was going to be running for U.S. Senate. She was the commissioner for the Department of Administration, and I had tried to find out how we could get access to grant funding that the city had already been awarded but was locked up because prior to my administration there were 4 years of no audits done. And the state of Alaska said, sorry, there's no exception. Until you go back and do these audits, you cannot get any more grants, no more future grants, and you can't get access to these grants that you already have hundreds of thousands of dollars in. And I said, well, I can't go back in time, and there are documents that don't exist, and I had a CPA come and do a kind of a review of what it would take to go back and do the audits for those 4 years, and it was going to be like $600,000. And he said that none of them would be anywhere close to clean or acceptable audits. And so I called almost every department I could think of and every person I could think of, and everybody said, sorry, there's nothing we can do. We can't help you. This is an issue that can't be resolved because there's no exception for it. And finally, I got a hold of somebody who told me, you need to talk to Kelly Tshibaka. And I didn't know who that was. They gave me her phone number. I called her phone number, and she answered and talked to me for 40-some minutes about what the issue was, tried to understand it, listened, and said, I don't know exactly what I can do about this, but I'm going to find out. And she did. And she created a solution to this problem because she knew we couldn't go back in time. She knew we needed grants in the future. And she got other commissioners together, and they created a solution for us with conditions that once the funding was released, that we use it for XYZ. And that has been a huge help for Nenana because, as you guys know, we have been awarded several grants since then. That was more than 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago. And we were able to get the funding that was locked up in those other grants and get them finished and closed out. So to me, that spoke volumes because too many people in power positions of leadership and in bureaucracies pass the buck and say, sorry, that's not my job, or I can't do anything. And Kelly was quite different. So that's not the only thing that's impressed me about her, but I wanted you guys all to know what that type of leadership can do for a community like Nenana. Yeah, thank you.
It's not simple, but it's easy. Okay. Your ballot will look something like this. I don't know where my name will be on the list because they shuffle the names, but probably it'll be towards the bottom. So if Kelly Tshibaka is down here, you just bullet number 1 and keep it simple and then move on, okay? Yeah, just 1 and move on. That any other time you're spending is just spending extra time in the ballot box.
Congress, we have to do a little different though.
In Congress, you bullet, so wherever that sheet went, you bullet 1 and 2, yeah. And you guys can keep this. We'll use the other picture, Victoria. I'll find the other scroll because it's nicer. You guys can keep this as a, post it over at the grocery store, if that's helpful.
Yeah, no kidding.
And if it's helpful, to me, it's helpful to like break it down into the principles. So the principle is, if your person, it makes it into the top 2, none of your other choices matter. Right. But if your person is not going to make it into the top 2, I mean, if there's a possibility that they may not make it into the top 2, that's when your second and third and fourth choices matter. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Pam.
There's 2 more questions.
Sure.
My Christine Shields isn't here. She would be if she could be. She wanted me to ask you this, so I'm going to put her on speaker, but the question is, are you acquainted here? Hey, Christine. Okay, I'm taking you by Kelly so you can hear her answer. Her question is, are you acquainted with Nick Begich, and are you endorsing him, or are you constrained to be for Sarah because of President Trump endorsed you and Sarah?
Hey, thanks, Christine. Both good questions. Nick and I are friends. I also get along with Sarah. I'm not constrained to support Sarah because of President Trump. Both of them would be good in office. They both have really great strengths. Either of them is better than us pulling for Pelosi. Pelosi is trying to hold on to the House, and that radical left agenda does not help Alaska. And so either of them is fine for us as Alaskans.
Okay, that's what we were going to do, rank the red.
Yeah.
But my husband and I just kind of were leaning towards Nick a whole lot. We listened to his debate at the convention and we thought it was so great, his answers. And besides that, Sarah, she folded under just Alaska pressure. We didn't know if she would be able to stand up down in D.C. She kind of caved in when she was our governor, and that concerns us.
I understand that. So rank Nick 1 and rank Sarah 2. And then there are other people who prefer Sarah for other reasons, and I understand that. So those people need to rank Sarah 1 and rank Nick 2. We're going to do better with both of them than we are going to do polling for Pelosi.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for coming, Kelly. Just thank you so much. I wish I would have known it was going to be today, so I could have tried to get people out. But my husband and I had this appointment up in Fairbanks, so couldn't do anything about it.
Well, that's totally fine. We're going to actually be over in North Pole for a rally tonight if you're going to still be up there. Just make a whole day of it. But that's fine. We'll see you again. Thanks, Christine.
God bless you.
You too.
Okay, and
All right. So the thing I've been thinking about is I do not claim to be a historian at all, but I wonder, in the development of America, there are so many states that are very well developed. Ours is the most underdeveloped state of all of them. And so in the process of those states' formation and development, was that all just organic growth, or was it government assisted to be able to get basic infrastructure and even like more advanced infrastructure? Because I feel like here in Alaska, it is so hard to even get the most basic things that the rest of the states have that take for granted. And yet we're like pulling teeth just to get access to some communities that need resources. And I mean, and a lot of other things, not just access, not just roads, but just infrastructure that we can make Alaska functioning at a higher capacity, a different level or quality of life. So I'm wondering, like, how did that happen for other states, and why is or isn't it happening for us, and how can we change that for Alaska to change our quality of life?
Great, we're gonna have you run for public office.
I was thinking the same.
We already got one in the family.
Asking
I'll back
a
him
great
up.
question. You're absolutely right. The answer is they did have a lot of public assistance. That's why we have I's, I-10, I-66, I-95, and the ports and all of this infrastructure that was built with federal assistance. That's why we have a Department of Transportation federally. However, we also, so that's one problem. We entered on the same footing as other states. We've never been treated as on the same footing. That's a problem we need to solve. There's another challenge that we've had in this. When we entered into our statehood agreement, and a lot of people don't have a full picture of Alaska statehood history. One of the deals and contracts we made with them is we need a little bit of help getting our feet under us and getting started as a state. And so there was a little bit of a horse bartering that happened with the federal government. But then the way that we're going to take care of ourselves as a state, because we can't be dependents of the federal government forever, is we're going to develop resources on our land. We're going to be a resource state. And in that exchange, 90% of the revenue we generate on those lands is going to come back to the state of Alaska for us to build our own infrastructure and take care of ourselves.
Yes.
And 10% will be a revenue sharing agreement with the federal government. Our federal leaders, including my opponent, have changed that agreement. And it's now a 50-50 swap. And in some cases, they've sold out completely and said, you can just have 100% of the revenue from this land.
Wow.
Yes. And so when you think about, like, say, $1,000, and we were supposed to get 900 of it, and now we get 500 of it, and let's say $1,000 is actually $1 billion, that cuts significantly into your state budget.
Yeah.
And who's going to the state budget to ask for things like a bridge built in Nenana? Or a road or railroad from Fairbanks through Nenana out to Nome? Who's asking for money for Nome Port? It's us and these residents. And then who needs to take more of our PFD to pay for government expenses? And all of this kind of always comes back to the pockets of the people end up paying the price for decisions that are being made in DC. We were supposed to be independent, self-reliant, self-determination. It was all written into the contract. The contract has changed and it's not being honored.
Yeah,
We're still sitting.
That reminds me of the North Pole Refinery.
Exactly.
When they first built it back in the 70s, everyone was so happy we were going to have
Independent.
cheap gas.
Cheap gas, affordable energy. Mm-hmm.
That was the promise, and you know what happened
That
since
was the
then.
promise. We're still sitting on tens of millions of acres that the federal government has that were promised us as statehood and under BLM public land orders that were supposed to be resolved after ANWAR. The federal government holds our land that they're not supposed to hold. Land is sacred to us and it's valuable. And so we can decide what we want to do with it, how we responsibly develop it, or how we turn it over for private land ownership, what we do, if we hunt on it, how we use it. But when we can't decide that, those are...
It's interesting when you say federal government, like for native allotments. Yeah, native allotments.
Exactly.
They recently had the native allotment giveaway for the Vietnam veterans.
Yes.
That's a good deal, great. But there's also many hundreds and perhaps even thousands of native elders that didn't get.
They didn't get it.
Didn't get
and in
native allotments,
Southeast,
which I think a lot of them are old enough to be Vietnam veterans'
They
parents.
are.
And they should have priority
They should.
over the Vietnam veterans.
and the Southeast veterans, the land that they're giving them is in the interior north of Fairbanks. But the federal government has land in Southeast that it could turn over, and they're saying, that's not our land. We don't want to move away from our families. And it seems like a bait and switch. You're pretending to offer us land, but that's like offering us land down in Oregon. Like, that's why this doesn't make any sense. And yes, ma'am.
Have you pitched this whole in Begich's?
We have, yes.
I'm not from here. I'm from Lower Yukon.
Mm-hmm.
And when I go to the store here or buy gas, I'm like, oh, I go, but I was up there, living up there. If you don't receive any type of assistance from the government, you struggle.
That's right.
I mean, up there, the price of a bag of groceries to get here, $20.
That's
Up
right.
there, it's like $70, $80.
That's right.
And I don't think they understand, when I tell people, when they're gonna talk to people in the villages, I ask you to use smaller words, something you can understand. The schooling is really bad up there. Half of them fail, half of them drop out, half of them fail, pass just enough, basic English. It's not that, where I come from, it's, English speaking, but ours is still broken. But that is a big thing. We always ask, like, what can we do to make the prices cheaper? Murkowski's name, she went up one year and she was surprised about $40 for a box of Tide soap, and she never did anything in the election year. And that's why Pacola got voted in, is because she's native and she's from Bethel area. That's exactly why she got voted in. The natives voted for her, and what I do know is in the village, they say out here you get strong voters, but if the people in the villages don't like you, you're gonna lose.
Right.
Murkowski won she's still writing off her dad's name, and they vote for people they know up there. Because I've lived in many villages up there. I'm from the village.
Which village?
I'm from Mountain Village. So, up there is way different than here. They vote for names they know, and unless you can get to them the way they can understand them. So,
Critical information.
my suggestion would be when you have your little meetings up there, because they'll eventually vote you in. When the villagers get together and vote for one person, that person gets voted in. That's exactly why Don Young and Murkowski's been in forever.
Right.
Anchorage, Fairbanks, these bigger places could get you in possibly, but you need the village to vote.
That's right.
And when you talk to them, I'm gonna suggest you use small words. Don't make it like you're talking down on them, just, don't use big words like. Don't use big words. Because if we don't understand you, we're not gonna.
I think you correctly analyzed the challenges that I've had when I've been out in the villages, and also the successes. So when I've slept on the floors and gone door knocking and been frostbit and eaten whale, I served Nuapitak up in Piagvik. We've won a lot of hearts and won a lot of votes, but you're right that it is hard for people to move away from what is familiar and what they've known for 50 years. So we found that when they understand some of the things that have changed, then they more easily change their votes. And one of the things that we've explained is they pay the high prices because of a decision she made and has continued to make sense. We need to modify the Jones Act so that we have much lower shipping prices. There was a...
That's what you need to tell them.
Yep.
Here on the road system, the prices are only, to me, I grew up in all of those, and I never got assistance. So
That's right. And when they shut down those resources in rural Alaska, we have to take the government to check. But it makes me upset, for example, when they shut down the Tongass 2 years ago, and they handed us $25 billion. You're missing a zero. Like, there's so much that we're losing in Southeast and in our statewide economy when you shut down ANWAR, when you shut down ANWAR, when you shut down Tongass, and they don't understand the value to our economies and what's happening. So I agree with you that they can't live in rural Alaska without government help, but that's because they're not letting us be self-sufficient and live on self-determination. And so if we can start making that transition, rural Alaska knows what to do best with rural Alaska resources. And that's how our state started before we ever became a state even.
The biggest thing they're struggling now is with fish. So
Absolutely.
whoever- in Kuskokwim and Yukon area, the biggest thing is the salmon.
Yes.
I mean, if nobody's talking about it, if you want to get their vote up there, you need to bring up issues that are up there, the salmon, the high price of fuel, so you can explain to them why, because Murkowski was involved in this contract, you guys, like, how are you doing it here? But-
Yes.
But use,
Small words. We're sending a video out to rural Alaska right now that talks about some of these issues.
You should let me watch it first.
Like, for example,
Seriously, it's amazing.
it just asks some questions like, why do we still have a blood quantum requirement after 20 years of Murkowski?
Like, right before I moved here, Quintillion went up to,
Yes.
Vermont. They were using words we have in the dictionary.
Mm.
So during that time, I was explaining to the community because I understand what they were saying, but they didn't understand what they were saying.
I
so
see.
I was explaining it.
She can translate.
And so Quintillion's like, we might have a job for you.
Yeah.
But I never did. I
Yes.
just didn't hear it.
And on the fish issue, because this is probably relevant for many in the room, we need to change the Magnuson-Stevens Act so that we have an Alaska Fishery Management Council. There are 8 fishery management councils for the entire U.S. There are 3 just for the Atlantic Ocean. Alaska waters and coastline is larger than the entire continental U.S. combined. And our North Pacific Fishery Management Council has the largest jurisdiction. We share jurisdiction with Washington, Oregon, and part of California. Why? The Bering Sea is literally a different body of water than the Pacific Ocean. And the Seattle trawlers are making decisions about Alaska resources when Alaska voices know best what to do with Alaska resources. So if we had an Alaska Waters Fishery Management Council made up of Alaska voices, Alaska Native Rural voices, and we were making the decisions about Alaska fisheries, I am confident our Alaska fisheries would be doing better.
Amen.
That's an
Yeah.
interesting point because, they shut down fishing here. You can't
Yes.
fish with the fish wheel for 3 years now. I don't see why, and I don't think it would hurt if they had let this town get 2,000 fish here.
Alaskans know
I don't
best.
think it would
Amen, sister.
harm anything. I don't
The bycatch is way bigger than that.
Yeah, there's still hundreds of thousands of fish.
They've got to
going
move
up the
past
river.
research, and we've got to start funding
Why are
enforcement.
they being gone?
Did I'm sure you're aware of, them, the Yukon
Yes.
giving up, not giving up regulation to the federal government
Yes.
this past summer.
Yeah, and I think, so we're kind of seeing this trend in Alaska that I think is extremely dangerous. This goes against the sovereignty and self-determination we fought for decades ago.
That's
Some
why
people-
they didn't give us reservations, that's
That's
why they
right.
didn't give Native people in Alaska
Reservations, that's right.
They took a lot of power over there.
Yeah,
They
and
took all the power. I don't say
anytime we
all.
think it's more simple to cede our authority to bureaucrats in a beltway 4,000 miles away, we're moving the wrong direction. I think it's fine to partner with them or give them input, but remember, and I just had this talk when I was in Healy, every 4 years, the decisions are gonna go like this. And Alaskans aren't gonna do that. We're gonna be consistent in our opinion. We're have robust debate, sometimes fights. But we come to these common principles. We are a resource development and driven state. Resources include fish. Sometimes I'm in rooms where it seems like they forgot that fish are resources. Resources include fish. And we develop those resources responsibly. And we know best what to do with our land because we understand that our land and our people are sacred. So we understand that protecting and conserving those resources so that they're sustainable is a critical top priority. So us coming together with our voices and our autonomy and our decision to make the decisions about what we do in this state is our best bet for our future. Giving that authority away to bureaucrats in a beltway 4,000 miles away who've never put a boot in this state, don't understand this state, and don't have investment in this state is moving in the wrong direction. And because they make a right decision at this point in time, you see, once you give them this decision, then they start taking all the decisions. Once you give them a little bit of land, then they start taking all the land.
Like Walker with China.
And we don't want them to just start taking, because then we start losing our Alaskan voice in these decisions. And this is very concerning to me, like the conversations that we have around fisheries. Where's our Alaska Native rural voices in these decisions? The conversations we have about protecting fish and game. And how can we have an FSB making decisions about things that Alaskans know differently about? And would we have better return on the game that we have in Alaska if we managed it differently? I am not in favor of ceding authority over to the bureaucrats that toss with the wind and instead keeping that authority here. That's where I think we land. Yep, Pam.
Yep.
Okay, it was our last question. Apparently I have a meeting.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
Okay, because there was two people, me and
That's fine. You have the microphone for all the last questions.
Well, I have two in one. He had a suggestion, and then I have a question. His suggestion is a bridge from Juneau to Seattle, across the ocean to bypass Canada. No, you guys laugh, but it's only 40 miles.
That's like,
Or 90 miles, and we would bypass all of Canada's bullcrap, and their gun confiscations and their passports. And if the refineries can do it, we can do it. So it's something to think about. And so I thought that was kind of cool, because I have never gone to Canada, and I really never want to. My question is, I have a million, but I'll just stick to one, because I am always an advocate for children and families. So I'm just going to go there. My friend Misty went to Eagle. There are no more Native kids in Eagle. They are gone. And I'm hearing that there's Native kids missing all over in villages here and there in Alaska. And I asked Misty, where did the Native kids go? They're taking them right from birth, and they're adopting them. And they're saying, oh, well, they're on drugs, they're on alcohol, this and this and that and that. Well, we have a Native family right here in Nenana who's not on drugs and alcohol. OCS took their kids. I heard through the grapevine. I feel like OCS is targeting the Native people, and I think it's human trafficking. I think I don't understand why Eagle doesn't have Native kids anymore. I mean, what good is a village without children, you know? And that breaks my heart. So I guess my question to you is, have you noticed the trend that I have, that OCS is going after the Native people and taking their children more than usual lately, and that they're a little bit out of control? I know Tammy Wilson has noticed it.
So this is the first I've heard of this since I left as commissioner. When I was commissioner, I was hearing about basically what we would consider like a lack of parental rights being protected during OCS. And
well, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but maybe you have a conversation with Tammy Wilson about it, or I can talk with you about it more in depth later.
Yeah,
but it's a real problem. And literally, they're taking them right from the womb. And I believe that a baby can bring a person away from drugs sometimes and help them straighten out their lives. And that a mama should be given a chance, not just have her kid taken away. Just because, yeah, maybe she made a mistake, but that doesn't mean she can't make it right, you know, with some counseling. But that's just my way of thinking. You know, I think every family's worth fighting for.
I don't think that's just your way of thinking. I think in Alaska we value family. That's an Alaska value. And families do better at raising children than government does.
Okay.
And so wanting to keep families together is a priority, not only for Alaska, but it's actually a legal priority. The way family law works is there's a default towards trying to keep families together, which I think is consistent with our values as Alaskans. There's all kinds of reasons, especially I think it's great that we've recognized tribal recognition as a state at this point, and the culture, the values, the language, the traditions that come when you live in a village, it cannot be replicated in a system. And to the point that you brought up, we know, my husband actually drafted the original version of the bill for tribal compacting in education. And when we have more culturally contextual experiences like education, they're more successful. And so for our long-term health and success, these are the kinds of things we're trying to prioritize and change as a state so that we can set ourselves up for a better future. So this is the first I'm hearing of it. I'll probably see Tammy today. Yeah, so I'll talk to her about it and see what's happening. Yeah, thanks, Pam. Okay, what can you do? Victoria handed out some information and materials. Please talk to your friends and family about the election. If you can bring 3 to 5 people to vote, that helps with our voter turnout, right? And that's part of how Nenana shifts the outcome of the race. We've had a couple dozen people come in and out their phone and everything else in here, and multiplying the value of your vote is part of how we increase voter turnout. And we move from 20% turnout to 30% or more, and that actually has a really big impact. If you want to help us by knocking on doors, you can knock on all the doors in Nenana. There have been times I've been stranded by weather in small communities, and I've knocked on every door. And that's amazing to just get to know what everybody thinks and how everybody feels. And you can actually change votes and get voter conversion of undecided voters just by having voter-to-voter conversations. If you want to help us with ads, we need help getting ads out that kind of explain my story, where I'm coming from, and explain voting record and what's happening. Any donation helps. You heard what our average donation is. That's the average. A little bit less than that, a little bit more than that goes a really long way. We're the little engine that could, and we're doing a great job.
Yes.
So thank you for making this possible. I really appreciate your support. And I really appreciate your time today. It really means a lot to me that you took some time out to come and share your thoughts and ideas and ask questions and be engaged in this election. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.